Okay. And I'm just gonna talk. I don't even know what's going on behind me. So up until I got you. So during the enslavement period, you had a large population of African descent here. Half of the population was of African descent, and half of those people were free. So Pensacola had a large free people here. Free people tend to be more, of course, literate. We also have a situation where even in the enslaved population, because it's city slavery and not rural slavery, city slaves tend to be skilled laborers. They can read a little bit. They're not just working in the fields the same way that you might have somewhere like Georgia or Alabama, you know. So there's just different exposure that came with that. And this whole skilled labor set the stage for them to be able to basically, after Reconstruction, build up the city, because they'd already been doing it for free for years anyway. So that's what we had in Pensacola. So that's what we had in Pensacola. Ultimately, though, they had to think of a way to control all these free folk. And I'm using this from the perspective of that woman, the anonymous woman off the internet. Keep her story in mind. So one of the things that happened was, you gotta learn how to divide people up. How can you do that? Well, you have free people of color here, you have free people of color here, you have immigrants coming here and they're working together and they're mixing together. So what do? Well, you gotta figure out a way to divide them in the place that they meet. So the place that they meet is public space, these streetcars, these railroad cars, right? So they passed the law, the Avery Bill, to separate people by race in the streetcars. If you go to, there's a supply store here in Pensacola, supply store, the brick building. Is everybody's from here? The hardware store? Yeah. Pensacola Hardware. I'm not gonna, their family did it. That's who did it. They passed the Avery Bill. And Avery presented a bill to separate streetcars. And ultimately, black folks in Pensacola, they protested. This was 50 years before Rosa Parks didn't give up her seat. And they won. It went to the Florida State Supreme Court, they won. So we won our bus boycott here 50 years prior. And I think that's really important to know, because people don't realize that this modern day civil rights movement didn't just come out of anywhere. Rosa Parks just didn't get tired one day. It's a long way to go from some things that had been happening for a long period of time. Another thing another way that they responded to it was through protests. What you see right here, and honestly I found this is actually my uncle, I was surprised to see this. He was working on the railroad, and they planned some kind of uprising to where somebody screamed out a call, and all of the men who worked on the line just attacked the foreman, and then he went to jail for 15 years. And this is an example of some of the many labor strikes and labor uprisings that was happening here in Pensacola as a direct response to this introduction of Jim Crow. Can I have some water, please?
Yes. You got some that you can read.
Oh, okay, let me see. Let's see what we want to talk about. No, you all, what did you just do? Okay.
Which one?
We'll go up here. Right here. Right here. No, go up. Mm-hmm. But what we also had though was, this is a nice little photo. If you can look in the background, these are black men in tux and tails. And these are some shoe shine boys who were trying to make a little money at whatever this jazzy event is here that they were attending. So remember, we're coming from that legacy of free people of color. So really, even though Jim Crow was on the horizon, they still It was bad, but it wasn't as bad as other places, I guess, is what I'm gonna say. Here you have, and if you can look at the picture, it's a lot of them. All behind the boys, all these black men in tucks and tails. I guess this is some kind of show that they're at. And I think they made a lot of money that night. Because there was a lot of shoes to shine. But why do we have that here? If you look at the top, black people in Pensacola, it says Negroes in Pensacola, Florida, own more real property than any other town of its size with its population. It talks about Belmont de Villiers and how people were amazed coming here. The many respects of relations of the two races in Pensacola seem to be unusually happy, and it is probably in no small degree to this and the excellent schools furnished there for both races that the prosperity of the colored people is largely due. So even though things were segregated and separated, people still were able to negotiate their own space, and they made way to make sure people weren't without, right? Whereas in other systems, when you have sharecropping and the systems are tied, it was just so separate here that these people were pretty much in Pensacola just doing their own kind of thing, and we get along when we have to get along. But you know, when you have your own stuff, when I asked this man how come when I asked how come the boycott lasted so long and what made it successful, he said, you know, we had our own stuff. But he didn't say stuff though. So when you have your own stuff, you don't have to worry about somebody not letting you come to theirs. Okay, you can go to another one.